So who are the people who have power in the text? Generally, it's the men who have power in the text in the book because it's usually the men. Well, it is the men who are the ones who inherit property once someone has died or passed away. Although there are exceptions, like there are women with power, such as Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She basically dictates Mr. Collins' life, and he does whatever she thinks is best for him. And also, for example, we have Miss Bennet, who in the beginning of the book orders around her husband to go and talk to Miss Bingley, and he just kind of follows her wishes. Although it could be just that he doesn't care. But someone like Elizabeth, she has a lot of power because of her intelligence. Like Darcy said one time that when they were having the conversation about what a proper woman is like, he talked about how it's important that a woman is intelligent, and Elizabeth is intelligent. So even though she doesn't have the status or class that another woman like Lady Catherine would have, she still has power because of that. And like at the beginning of the book, it says, if a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in one of a wife. The opposite also applies because it's much more important for a woman to marry than it was for a man, because a man could technically marry whoever he wanted to, because we see like Mr. Collins and Wickham just jumping from wife to wife. And the source of their power, well, they get most of their power just because, like I said, of their intelligence or their status. We see like Mr. Collins and Wickham just jumping from wife to wife. And the source of their power, well, they get most of their power just because, like I said, of their intelligence or their status, their wealth, their affluence. Like Bingley, the moment he comes to the neighborhood, he automatically draws a lot of attention because all the money he has, so in that he has power. And how do they hold on to their power? Well, again, they hold on to their power through marriage. And for example, a woman who wants to hold on to any power she has to marry a man who has just as much power so that she can hold on to it. A man, I guess, would have to also marry a woman of pretty high class. We always see Darcy talking about Elizabeth's low social class and how it would look bad if he married her. And that kind of marry a woman of pretty high class. We always see Darcy talking about Elizabeth's low social class and how it would look bad if he married her. And that kind of goes to show how it would be harder to hold on to his power without marrying someone of the same caliber class. And how is their power expressed? Well, of course it's expressed through all the money they have, the wealth, the attention they draw, but it's also expressed through their arrogance. Like, of course, Darcy's probably the prime example. He's very wealthy and affluent, and as a result, he's very arrogant because he thinks that his wealth and affluence is enough of a reason to get Elizabeth or anybody else to marry him, because he thinks that anybody would be lucky to marry him.
Go. Who are the characters who are treated differently in the text, and how? So in Pride and Prejudice, there are basically two aspects of a character that leads for them to be treated differently. One is their wealth or their class, and two tends to be their looks. And so for the looks, the main person is Jane, who in the beginning of the book is described as the only handsome girl at the dance by Darcy when he's talking to Bingley about who they should dance with. So Jane is sought after by most men, and so she'll be treated differently throughout the text and treated with a little more respect, and men will pay a special attention to her that they wouldn't do the favor to other women. And then the other aspect that gets characters treated differently are the rich men, and their pride will kind of, for example, Darcy, he has a little too much pride, and this turns off Elizabeth and makes her not believe what Darcy says, so instead she'll believe what Wickham has to say about his interaction between Darcy and his father in the past, even though, as it turns out, is not the truth. But due to Darcy's pride and vanity, she's more likely to believe Wickham, who is just a better liar in the end. And then another thing that gets men treated differently is their wealth and the fact that they're single. For example, Bingley, and at the beginning, the opening sentences says that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife, and it is assumed that Bingley wants a wife because he has a lot of money. So the girls in the story are gonna be extra nice, and this turns off Elizabeth and makes her not believe what Darcy says. So instead, she'll believe what Wickham has to say about his interaction between Darcy and his father in the past, even though, as it turns out, is not the truth. But due to Darcy's pride and vanity, she's more likely to believe Wickham, who is just a better liar in the end. And then another thing that gets men treated differently is their wealth and the fact that they're single. For example, Bingley, and at the beginning, the opening sentences says that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife, and it is assumed that Bingley wants a wife because he has a lot of money. So the girls in the story are gonna be extra nice and treat him differently than they would a married man because they have a vested interest in him.
What does the author omit from the text? Well, Jane Austen takes Pride and Prejudice from the point of view of Elizabeth, a lower class character who is kind of an anomaly because she herself doesn't think that women should marry for money, which Austen kind of tells satirically because her mother wants all 5 of her children to be like sold off in marriage, and so that she herself can live a happy life and keep their estate. She also omits what happens to a woman who doesn't get married, because basically most of the old enough women do get married, like Charlotte, who against her self-desire gets married to Collins because of her age, since she's 27, and also that Collins has a good background. Also, though they venture into the city, into London a bit, it's mainly told from people who are in the country, and the country is considered more of a lower class than people who live in the city. Also, independence for families. It's shown that the sister of Bingley, Mr. and Mrs. Hurst, though they're married, they're still living off of Bingley's marriage and getting their money from them. So they don't show the benefit. The sister of Bingley, Mrs. Hurst, Mr. and Mrs. Hurst, though they're married, they're still living off of Bingley's marriage and getting their money from them. So they don't show the benefits that occur from marriage, even though it's expected to get more money if you're from a lower class citizen and you marry into a higher class. It's not shown that you get money, and it doesn't show what happens. Is there anything offensive about the text? Well, obviously class rank is kind of offensive because Austen shows that pride comes in the way of your money and property that you own. And also the fact, there's a lot of, but what happens? Is there anything offensive about the text? Well, obviously class rank is kind of offensive because Austen shows that pride comes in the way of your money and property that you own. And also the fact, there's a lot of dramatic irony in this novel because Lydia runs away and marries Wickham, who is a soldier, and soldiers are kind of shown in a positive light, even though they're like petty foot soldiers. So it's shown ironic because Wickham wants money, and their mom only wants her to get married off for money, but it's the other way around. Okay, that's it. How long?
Okay, so the question is, how would this story be different if it were told from the perspective of a minor character? obviously it would be different in lots of ways, but one of the ways that it could be different is there would be the minor character wouldn't know the prejudice that's going on between the people of like higher classes and like the Bennets and Bingley and Darcy and all of them. So therefore, that would result in less bias. But that would only be less biased in that way. But because a minor character would also have their own personal bias based on their views and their opinions of people and stuff like that. So, like for example, a minor character might have a different opinion of Mr. Darcy than Elizabeth would, because Elizabeth, for example, she heard of Mr. Darcy than Elizabeth would, because Elizabeth, for example, she heard what Mr. Darcy said about her, and a minor character wouldn't have specifically heard about it. They would just they would have heard about it through other people. They wouldn't have been there experiencing it. So their opinions would be different about Mr. Darcy. And another example is Elizabeth and Miss Bennet and their view on Mr. Collins. Miss Bennet thinks that Mr. Collins is great for Elizabeth just because of his social status, and she wants her daughter to get married to somebody of high class and well respected and stuff, as opposed to Elizabeth, who actually heard Mr. Collins' whole spiel, so she has a different opinion on him. So also another example could be if Mr. Bennet was telling the story, this just hypothetically different opinion on him. So also another example could be if Mr. Bennet was telling the story, this just hypothetically, it would obviously be a different point of view, which would, pretty much what he does is sit in his office and kind of just let his family come and talk to him. So if the story was told from his point of view, it would be much more dull. There would be less things going on, and it would just overall it would be not much beef to the story. So just to sum it all up, if a minor character was telling the story, then it would be a different kind of bias, not necessarily less bias, but a different kind of bias. And yeah, that's good.
So the question here is, which group would be offended by how the story is told and how? And the groups that would be offended include the traditionalists, the feminists, the extreme upper class, and the extreme lower class. The feminists would be offended because at the end of the novel, Elizabeth gives in to basically the sense of inferiority thrust on her previously by Mr. Darcy, and instead of basically maintaining her position throughout the entire novel, she gives in at the end. And she says, yes, I do succumb to love and everything, and I do end up marrying this man. And the example of where she does this is they were all warm in her admiration, and at that moment she felt to be the mistress of Pemberley might be something. She was basically impressed by how large and grand the estate is, and I guess this would offend feminists. And traditionalists would be offended by how brash her actions are throughout the novel. For example, when she rejects Mr. Collins and exclaims that upon my word, I'm perfectly serious in my refusal. You cannot make me happy, and I'm convinced that I'm the last woman in the world who would make you so. And so by doing this, she rejects a perfectly valid marriage proposal by this time, or by the judgment of this time, where she could have been, somewhat well off, where she would be, I guess, happy in her home, able to, fulfill the duties of a wife, but she says no because she doesn't want to marry for economic reasons. This novel would also end up defending the extreme upper class and the extreme lower class. They defend the extreme upper class because Mr. Darcy ended up marrying into Elizabeth's family, even though Lydia ran off with Wickham, which is an extremely disgraceful thing in this time period. And although Elizabeth's family was much lower in rank and wealth than his own, he still ended up marrying her, which is offensive to, again, the very wealthy in this time period. The extreme lower class would be offended by the way that Elizabeth is impressed by Darcy's home, how she's impressed by the banks that were neither formal nor falsely adorned, and how at the end of the novel her sentiments had undergone so material a change, where she had a change of heart even though he had insulted her because of her inferiority and her lack of wealth earlier in the novel. These are just a few reasons why some groups would take offense to Pride and Prejudice, mainly just because of the way that the characters are portrayed as well as the storyline unfolds.